map picks. I'm keen to see if it's going to continue the trend. Obviously, we do have Bad News Bears map pick coming up. It's going to be Overpass, which I'm pretty excited about. That's my favorite map in the pool, joined here by Upmind and Boggs. Boggs, how you doing, mate? I just wanted to ask you, we got Overpass coming up. You know, we can get Oceanus starting out on that CT side. I believe it was you were having a chat to me about Oceanus before, saying that you've got KMZ, he can play a little bit of an AWP role. If he gets rolling here, and let's say we add in a couple more pieces there for Oceanus, what do you think the possibilities are that they can actually get control of this economy? They can start rolling out on that CT side, because it's a pretty AWP-centric map Overpass, right?
Yeah, I think that it will play into KMZ's aggressive opping style, and if he can get that momentum going, similar to what Peter was able to pull off on Nuke,
Mm-hmm.
then that will give Oceanus some momentum that'll get Melio and Joel's involved. You might see Vec chiming in there, and overall, you can see Oceanus looking completely different off of the back of some of those great potential plays that KMZ is capable of with the big green gun on Overpass.
I'm keen to see it. I would like to see a bit more of a competitive map too here. Upmind, I wanted to ask you, I mean, in OS, it's a different story. Asia, it's a different story. How often are we seeing Overpass in some of these NA videos?
I mean, it's very consistent. Lots of teams, they maintain Overpass in their map pool, and it's still very much proven. Most of the top teams in the world in terms of North American stature, they tend to like Overpass a whole lot more. And it comes down to the tier 2 scene, and we see it a whole lot more here as BNB. They played it a couple times in January, but folks, we get to see that in action. Overpass is live between Bad News Bears and Oceanus. As Oceanus, they kick off the CT half with a little bit more of a split, and Bad News Bears, they're counteracting that with almost a full long take.
I like the full long take, Gus. You know I love long takes on Overpass pistol rounds. You don't normally get a CT side playing anyone towards that long angle, so you can get a ton of control. Bank smoke prepped by Pete, and the site has been abandoned by Oceanus. They're playing full retake on the A site. That bomb goes down, back dice in full, like, unders pass control gets taken by Bad News Bears. The round should be theirs with a lock and key. Jolt is going to flank towards long, and Bomb is planted back dice. But it's a 5v5 retake, and in a situation like this, anything is possible. Oof, that's a great start, though, by Vec.
Look how aggressive this is. They wanted full control back over towards Dumpster and Bank, but they still have to worry about Melio. Melio still getting a second kill onto Peter, but watch out, Jonji, the man who was about to pull off a flank over towards Party, well, he had to double back to long, and just like that, it's actually going to be a triple for Melio. It was a great take by Bad News Bears in terms of counteracting the position in a sense, but that whole Bank approach ended up breaking apart at the seams at the very beginning of things, and Bad News Bears off the readjustment back to site. That's just the 1v1s going down in the Oceanus favor. So that's a big pistol round dub, as Oceanus, they have their first lead of the game.
They have their first lead of the series. Entirely.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's a great change for them mentally. As I said, they still played their game. They still played to win, and they still played with confidence. So to see that roll over, I'm not surprised. For them to pick up this win on the pistol round over Bad News Bears is huge for them. And if they can take down this force buy, Oceanus will start to grow that snowball of momentum, that snowball of confidence. And things could get a little dicey for Bad News Bears if you give Oceanus any room to play.
Still very much loose in terms of the positioning from Oceanus over towards the A side, but it's a completely different story on B with essentially a crossfire over towards the water side. So we did see Bad News Bears approach that position. Things could start getting a little bit muddy, but BNB. Sweet time. This A side is looking quite tempting in a sense. These players are still maintaining contact in bathroom. And with this initial hold, it's going to allow for a whole lot of time for the Oceanus players to rotate back over towards the bank side. So this is beautiful from Oceanus, and more importantly from Vec. Vec gets the first frag back. Jonji still has that AK in his hands, capitalizes back the Deeg into an AK, and now with 30 seconds left, Bad News Bears, they're running out of options.
They're running out of time. They're running out of space. There's an imminent flank coming in from Khan in the form of Castro. Joel's is clearing out back Khan too, so that's going to signal Castro to rotate back up through the stairs. This sort of snake in the grass in the form of Melio out towards long, I think, is the biggest spanner in the works right now for the Bad News Bears. That's a bomb stop.
7 seconds.
They can't get the trade. Oh, Melio! That's a huge triple. He gets right there out long. He gets 4 on the round, but those last 3 kills secure it for Oceanus. And he's one of those players I called upon to stand out and start fragging. He does just that with the quad in round number 2. That's going to shut down Bad News Bears' force, put Oceanus on the fast track to 3 rounds, and that's a pretty clean round, too. That's going to build that CT bank. And as Pilsky said, if they can get the money growing, that's going to make things a ton easier.
Again, interesting from Melio, because we know this guy to be a stellar individual fragger, including Vec. Hello, Vec, just running on by with the MP9. Melio has almost doubled his frags from Nuke in just 2 rounds. I mean, that's just insane to me. And now the rest of the team, they look to rally back and clean up. KMZ with a 3K at the end of things. He had 16 on the first map. Yeah, no, good cleanup. Not much economic damage. They're going to be able to reinvest pretty easily. Bad News Bears back on the bye. But again, great work by Melio. Still maintains no deaths. Still maintains things relatively safe, relatively solid. But what sort of adjustments should we see now from the BNB side? Because these early round interactions are starting to get a little bit worse for Rare.
I want to see the op come out for Pete. That was such a catalyst for the Bad News Bears in the previous half, or previous map, and it's been very effective at shutting down aggressive plays. But Alter, that's a good pick, and it will be a trade plus some damage exchanged onto Melio. This is something the Bad News Bears can use to work off. Pete spots out one, but there's 2 different players. That's a great job by John G to back up Peter, who then traces over to Melio, peeking around towards Party. That's going to yield a 2-man advantage for Bad News Bears. Great team play from the former Riot Squad teammates of Peter and John G. That's going to be a huge boost for Bad News Bears. Spongy, though, gets blindsided by Joels, who pushes up aggressively. He's just going to fall off with that pick, too. Wisely so, as he could get flanked upon from behind in the form of Swisher, as the B site will be the target zone from Bad News Bears. A bomb yet to cross. It's on low HP Pete. Joels, though, has to be dead to rights as John G's on the flank.
Oh, Joels, he thought about it for a second. It was well played by him, well disciplined, but now Castro left now in a 1v3, spots one towards the short side, but this is well done by Castro. Still Oceanus dropping a couple of players here and there in really the developing rounds. So still racking on a little bit of cash, but no round back for the boys of Oceanus. They've had their time in the spotlight, but now B&B, they at least take one back off of what was way more aggressive of a hold from Oceanus once again. They've been targeting that deep fountain side again and again, and this round it showed with really all the kills going around fountain and playground in general.
They did have some SMGs to play, so you are going to try and get aggressive with those, try and cut down the angles against the rifles. You're not necessarily going to win a long or even mid-range duel against an AK with the MP9. But this pinch that they had from Long and Party could have been so effective. They get the first kill. That's going to be so much information and map control for Oceanus that it can completely turn the tide of the round. Instead, John G comes in, backs things up from Playground, and Bad News Bears are able to capitalize on that 2-man advantage, rotate down to B, and grab themselves a round.
Still early on, we're seeing the effect of the scoped rifle, none other than the AUG, come out for Vec as he wanted that first contact in Playground. Didn't exactly work out in his favor. It goes down to 55 HP. A little bit more of a default this round for Bad News Bears, though, with a whole lot of attention over towards the B side of things. But with that first contact in Playground and Peter ending up alive, he goes back, groups up with the rest of B&B. Now they're just aiming down for the micro interactions and see if they can clear this side out.
Molly's leading the charge, still smokes up from the CT side, and the flank from KMZ could be that linchpin for Oceanus. They have all the information that it's going to be B, 4 players to defend. That can all get ripped apart by a few well-placed flashbangs plus some mollies. Great flashbang for Castro, but he's only able to get one. Alter chimes in, spots out another, takes down the player back pillar as well. Beck will trade out, but it's still a 3v3, but there's no utility left for the CT side, and the bomb is going down. KMZ still on the flank, could get huge, but Melio Melio getting dropped, and Janji again flicking over to head after head, shutting things down. And in the 1v3, KMZ starts it well, does have a kit. The lack of smoke is going to be his undoing as Swisher and Janji play a perfect 1-2 punch. And Bad News Bears will strike for 2 in a row, destroy the economy of Oceanus, and most importantly, win a round that not only breaks the economy, but also destroys the confidence of Oceanus, as they had 4 out of 5 players on that site and 1 on a fast rotation.
Again, it just had to come down to the slow approach, in a sense, from the Bad News Bears. Just trying to make it as safe as possible. And of course, Janji being Janji, in a sense. I mean, you can always trust on him to at least have his aim in perfect form. It's 2-tap. Oceanus, they break down on that site. But even then, going into this round, they have part adjusted, because even because they have the SMGs and just the upgraded pistols, they're not going aggressive. This time they want to go for a little bit more of a gamble. One person early toward the B side, just waiting to see what would happen in terms of the early contact. But the flowchart that this team has, he's going to group up all the way back on A, put up a 4-man stack there. And Bad News Bears, they might have to face on yet another lockjaw defense from Oceanus if they can actually capitalize.
It's the force from Oceanus too. They lose this round. It's 4-3 in the favor of the Bad News Bears for all intents and purposes. So this is a pretty critical round for Oceanus to pick something up with. Castro is going to be a huge factor in this round for Oceanus. Whether he gets a few kills or not is going to pretty much dictate the outcome of the round, unless the pistols are able to do something significant. They look to be ending towards B again. This is something very reminiscent of High Coast's Overpass, and something that's very reminiscent also of that Chaos roster too. They like the B side of Overpass a lot. It's a very common spot, and Swisher deletes that rifle. That's a huge opening kill. Not only is it an opener, but it's a rifle gone.
Whole lot of damage being done by Oceanus early round, though. 3 players down to just about under 30 damage. Jules has to finish off Peter here, and no way! Backstab from Jules. We talked about the BM potential between these two teams. We spot it out now, but Oceanus, are they even gonna go for this? No. The amount of picks that we saw earlier from that scout, it's indeed not gonna come into play later on. So instead, now a little bit of a save as they start to maybe wrap around some positions to see if they can snag some exits. Otherwise, this is a little bit curious of a scenario for OCG, considering that they don't have too much to actually save up. This has to be more for the long run in a sense, considering that they can't really rebuy all too much going into the next round.
I like this call, though. You can still get some damage done with the armor on Melio, Vec, and Joels. Joels can drop over the Deagle and keep the MAC-10. The MP9 playing in Con is a very deadly weapon. Double it up with Melio and the 5.7. That could do some serious damage. Deagle will get dropped to Castro. So overall, it's not a terrible half-buy for OCG to try and fight this with. If they would have thrown their bodies to the wind, they would have nothing, and it would be a pretty much guaranteed round for Bad News Bears. Instead, there's a chance for some economic damage, as you love to say, and also a chance for a round victory. We got a Zeus.
Comment things down in this round. It's just a whole lot of anticipation for that Zeus, because oh my, AMs. Oh, this becomes even more beautiful for him. He's on top of the smoke. If anyone wants to burst out, or if KMZ wants to force out the option, this Zeus could come out into play. This is giving Bad News Bears a little bit of control over towards that water side. That's a deep nade that certainly should not have hit onto KMZ, but that Molly's gonna drag him out, and Janji was fully ready for it. Ain't shooting some bodies, okay. Okay. A little bit of revenge for the last round. I mean, that's just Janji in a nutshell. Still B&B. They were going to face on a 3-man B site, but they've at least restricted it down a little bit more. Still 2 and towards that back line with an SMG and an upgraded pistol. But this is a great spot for Vec if he didn't run into the crosshair and the crossfire of Janji. Now all alone is Spongy, really just trying to clear up some space. But instead, it's a little bit too aggressive. Didn't have much to work with in this round either, so OCG, they're not going to upgrade anything off of that. Swisher heard all of it.
Joels?
Interesting.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, interesting. Jonji gets the last kill onto Melio as Melio snags up another one. Bad News Bears with a low reinvestment going into this next round, but yeah, Bad News Bears bringing back a 3-0 scoreline, but yeah, off of some interesting rounds and their economy getting a little bit picked apart, Oceanus, they finally have back not only the rifles, but a double op now, Boggs.
I like this. Joel's has gone for the drop. He might be hitting for that monster. Pete doesn't appear to be so. Peter has his off as well, but the first real juicy engagement between Pete and KMZ does not result in any kills. The broadside strike water instead of ship, but Spongy will eliminate that first op on the B side. That's Joel's down for the count, and a massive opening frag. Pete catches off Vec. That's 2 quick picks going the way of Bad News Bears. And before we're even able to really set up on these sites, Oceanus has been picked apart.
Boost.
Castro will get 1 kill, but he's very low and eventually taken down by that boost towards water. And a 2v4 for Oceanus does not spell a good result.
Melio, he popped off a little bit earlier on with restricted firepower in a sense. He's in a nice cheeky position. Swisher! Oh man! Barely with that info call from Spongy! And KMZ now in a 1v4 restricts it down to a 1v2 off of a sick flick onto Spongy. But that's the extent of the damage. He's down to 10 HP. This man's got to save. Bad News Bears, they make the take efficient in a sense, but things got fun in the end. I'm trying to look at the bright side of things because Oceanus, once again, they get picked apart in the 1v1s of a Bad News Bears and a little bit scattered of a tempo in a sense over towards that B-side take.
I think Bad News Bears have figured out the general way that Oceanus want to play towards A, and they don't necessarily want to fight that. They'll take the early fountain control because if they don't, they know Oceanus will exploit, and they won a duel out there that was Pete. But overall, Bad News Bears like how things are working on B. That's a beautiful flick there from KMZ. Took a dink on that too. So fast reactions coming out there from the lone American on the Canadian squad. But Bad News Bears are reading Oceanus very well. Oh, we got the boost. We got the boost. No, wait.
Let's go.
Are they gonna still go for it? Nope, they're gonna call it.
No, it's a little bit off-timed. Yeah, one person fails off of it, and that's gonna at least break it down. But that's more than obvious. Again, Bad News Bears, they were already going for a little bit of BM after the knife, so that would have been a little bit more fun to watch, especially with the AWP back in the hands of Peter. KMZ with that hero rifle, with a hero up. He's gonna go for the wide swing down in tunnels. Castro here for the support. Jonji now waiting up for the pop flash, but he's not able to get anything off of it. Instead, now Castro still alive, 15 HP, wide swing. Alter takes him down. KMZ still on site. Decent angle. Just pivoting around. Now he even has support over towards short. Bad News Bears, what seemed like an easy take. Some well-timed aggression has halted the take, and Joel's again takes down Jonji. Peter now in a 1v4, gonna make it a 1v3. Still 2 players on top of box, and Vec gets a kill with the scouts. It's the story of the ecos once again. We saw it a whole lot in that first map, especially from Bad News Bears. But this time, Oceanus. Man, certainly surprising. Bad News Bears, almost no chance off that take. And going into this round, I don't know if they're going to drop any of them, but triple op setup potentially.
Aggression on the CT side was the recipe for success for Oceanus when they played Bad News Bears on Inferno on the 31st in the Cash Cup. They're replicating that success here on Overpass. Most of their successful rounds have come off of early aggressive picks, off of early aggressive plays. The play in towards monster tunnels there from Oceanus was the prime counter to Bad News Bears. You have KMZ on a good spawn, you give him the op, he gets you a kill. Then you work around that, you have the pistol spamming around. It's just a multitude of utility going around. It's a multitude of close angles being played by lesser weaponry. That's when the lesser guns thrive, is chaotic situations such as we just witnessed. And now here comes more aggression. Beautiful flash from KMZ, and Melio follows it up with 3 quick kills. Headshots for 2, a spray on 1 more, finally answered back. But Oceanus have obliterated Bad News Bears in this round to try and tie things up at 5 apiece. The flashbang was perfect, but Melio is heating up, Gus, and this is not Nuke. This is Overpass, a completely different map and a completely different look from Oceanus.
We mentioned this in the pre-game where Oceanus, one of the keys to success is just turning that tempo that Bad News Bears had against them in the first map and just using it to their own advantage. Great stuff over in Fountain, but ooh, okay. You gotta calm down a little bit because now Bad News Bears, they come onto this site and they already sweep up a 4v2 down to a 1v2. That is unbelievable now for Bad News Bears. What a flick from KNZ, but Spongy takes him down at the end of things. I don't know what to tell you. This Bad News Bears team, still yet another thing that we mentioned before. Each and every one of these players are hot free agents in the North American Counter-Strike market. Each and every single one of them can pop off at any moment, and we indeed saw it at the very end. Melio, he's had a great map thus far, but man, oh man, did the Bad News Bears counteract that momentum.
If you're Vec, you can't dry peek short with no information, no bomb tick. That is a massive blunder that cost Oceanus the round. If Vec holds his cool and doesn't go for the aggressive peek, it's going to force Bad News Bears to make a play instead of Oceanus. He had the rotation from KMZ too. All they had to do was buy their time and wait for that bomb tick to come through and then peek off of that where they can isolate a 1v2 duel against the player who's not planting the bomb. You do that, you can have a much easier chance of winning that 2v2 situation. Instead, you try and force a 1v1 duel with no information, and it goes awry. And here we see Peter and KMZ exchanging broadsides once more this time, both landing shots but not quite taking down the other battleship. Still, good first damage going back both ways.
Am I the only one hearing some Pepe jams?
You know,
some real jammers. Oh, there you go. I was dealing the vibe, but there you go. I mean, it was just that suspense, waiting for the climax of the round to actually happen, and Vec comes out at the perfect moment to spot down Alter. Again, default in this round coming in for the Bad News Bears as both Peter and Spongy went out their interaction. Castro, not too predictable of a predicament, but even then, Melio capitalizes back onto Janji. Now it's a 2-on-3 with Peter and Swisher wanting to wrap back to A, but they still have the insurance policy of KMZ in the back of sight.
There's no nade to finish off the low HP player of either KMZ or Joel's, who sits on one solitary point of health.
That's if KMZ actually wants to go back, by the way. This is a weird spot.
Yeah, I think KMZ is better off holding. I think they learned from their mistakes in the previous round. Bad News Bears were hoping for another overly zealous peek like that. Joel's, though, pushing up towards Optimus, that's a free kill. Surely he takes down Peter, unless Dirty Pete can do the spectacular once more. KMZ drops Swisher. That's the round. There's no more time. The bomb is lost, and KMZ will put the final nail in Peter's coffin, too. Oceanus, they're starting to strike back here, Gus. That's a great response from them. And this is a really good look on Overpass. Yes, it is a CT-setted map, but Oceanus, they look cool, calm, and collected. And against this incoming deco from Bad News Bears, or I think it's more of a deco force now with a P250 for Peter for utility, Oceanus are in prime territory to try and start for a 9-6 half.
And let me remind the folks back home, Oceanus, they've restricted their map pool really down to only 3 maps in this past month ever since they reconvened from their break. This is our first time on Overpass, and man, they're making it worth it. They're making it look like a great counter pick against this Bad News Bears team. Still more work to be done, though. Still now a 3-on-4. Bad News Bears, they're really aiming for some economic damage in the rounds, trying to knock away some of these rifles and force up some reinvestments. But even then, it's a force buy, and Castro opens things up with a massive spray. His own flash does it for him, and not only that, but Alter now in a 1v4. Still restricting things to a 1v2. So still with a minute left, more than enough time for him to chill out, really lurk out for some positioning, but he's actually approaching this B site. He wants this against KMZ, but KMZ fully on a run takes down Alter. I don't know how many times we're going to see that in this set. Someone with an op just still swinging, not stopping at all, still able to get the kill. This time it was for KMZ, but good stuff from OCG, especially Castro. Well timed.
This is what I wanted to see from KMZ, though. Aggressive plays like that with the op, taking the initiative and taking the battle to the Bad News Bears. There's no buy from the T side either. Melio going aggressive once more out towards T-Con. Good nade damage, but he could get blindsided here. He's not thinking the right way, and he will indeed fall. Next year to try and back it up, but this is 2 free kills for Bad News Bears. They might not have armor. They might not have a significant investment. They've still picked up 2, and now a third on the KMZ. Things are falling down like London Bridge as Oceanus are getting washed away by the storm that is Bad News Bears. The prime opportunity for Joel. He gets 1, but not the second. It's a 1v3 now. Castro on the A side. Alter swinging with the off. Takes a dink, but it's John G to finish. Hat-trick of frags for John G. Bad News Bears, a bare minimum investment from them, and they're somehow able to win this round. That is shambolic if you're OCG, but if you're Bad News Bears, that is nothing more than what you want to have happen. I'm sure their comms are nothing but laughs and smiles right now. We heard Swisher in the pregame interview say that they'd love to laugh during their wins or their losses. That is definitely one that's going to signal some jovial attention from the Bad News Bears.
Oh, absolutely. Bad News Bears. I mean, they have to be exuberant in a sense. Super happy with that round, but they still have a whole lot more work to do. OCG, you talk about shambolic, and their economy is the very definition of it. Hard force, limited util. Bad News Bears with the early pick. KMZ now with a mag 7. Still can boot on more damage. Unbelievable that he was able to get Swisher down to 9 HP. Now Joel's on the flank. This is looking possible. Melio barely has a gap in that smoke, but right on time too with a flash. The players from the Bad News Bears, they run away back into short and they readjust back to mid with just about a minute left.
That's a great call from Bad News Bears. Pete calling the audible. Makes the play up towards A. Alter is down to 1 point of health, so I'm assuming if the op will get tossed over to him instead of in the hands of John G, we probably will see Bogdan's Law. I say that, but no. Alter's just going to hold towards long. John G with full health is going to hold on to the op over Peter too, which I think is a bit of an interesting play. But, you know, the Bad News Bears always have a plan, so we'll see what their plan is. All 3 Oceanus players are rotating in through the bank and jump up sides. It's a great post plant set up by Bad News Bears too. And oh, this is a good boost.
Yeah.
There's a smoke. Thus, this could be the win condition here. The spam's not going to connect.
That's
it's all
going
to go awry.
That's got to be it. John G needs this pick, but it's not going to happen. Joel's going to be able to get the defuse. And oh, John G, you got to be kidding me. Gets the kill right after time, and yet another head scratcher of an ending in a sense. Bad News Bears. They had full post plant positions, but looks like again their attention was a little bit more mixed. They still wanted to look out over towards the mid position, of course, but Oceanus with a great quick retake of that A site and a smoke down on bomb. I mean, it's as easy as you can get, really. Oceanus gonna tie up the half 7-7 as really they're the ones reinvesting. Bad News Bears, they still have a whole lot in their pockets, but I think the laughter just turned into silence.
They do still have 7 rounds on the T side. That is no small factor. That is something we can't gloss over. That's a very solid T side at half for Overpass. And when you look at the fact that Peter only has 5 kills as opposed to the 25 he landed in the previous map, Bad News Bears are still doing quite well, all things considered. It's actually John G this time to lead the charge. But here comes Pete with the op in his hands, trying to find an opening pick towards the B site. Might be able to catch something, and Melio walks right into the scope. That's what you don't want to do, is give Peter confidence. That's exactly what he just got gifted. This con setup, though, could be pretty influential. Ooh, 1-for-1 trades at this point. Not going to be enough, and it's all crashing down again. Oceanus down to 1.
Okay, KMZ readjusting, could definitely get a pick off of this. Don't know why that flash didn't do anymore. KMZ certainly too far away for this interaction, but again, scout actually in his hands. Alp was still dropped down, but he can't exactly pick anything up. Instead, now Peter looking over towards the heaven position is going to be able to take back KMZ after a slick headshot onto Alter. So the Bad News Bears looking a little bit shaky in a couple of times, but Oceanus certainly back into form. We're going to take a little bit of a break as we anticipate the second half and see if Oceanus can keep up the tempo. We'll be right back.
They say that we're too young, I hate it. They say we're being dumb, so let them talk. We're living on the run, we'll make it, you and I. I know that we're not sober, but shut up and pull me closer, yeah. Holding me still too far away. Even when we're older, I promise that I'll still hold you like we're 17 and we're not afraid of making mistakes. Ooh. We're 17 and we're not afraid.
Hey, welcome on back, folks. We have a little bit of time to kind of pass by in this halftime, so we could run down the first half a little bit more. My name is Upmine, joined here by Boggs, and Oceanus certainly keeping this one close in comparison to the first map.
Oh yeah, it's a much better look from Oceanus. In fact, they look like a completely different team in their fragging prowess. Their overall mindset does seem to be the same. It's just the fact that they're hitting their shots now, and also the fact that Peter was not as influential a member of the Bad News Bears as he was on Nuke, dropping an absurd amount of frags. What was it, 25 in the first half? So without
Yeah.
that, it's a lot closer of a half. But now Pete will go to the CT side, where he had the most
Oh.
effectiveness on Nuke. That's going to be a scary thought here for Oceanus.
Yeah, I think it's going to be real scary now for the Oceanus players, because that's really Peter's style. Yes, he does like to go aggressive with that AWP, so certainly the attacking side of things, the terrorist side of things would be more influential, but especially with a little bit more CT-sided of a map like Overpass, we could see our boy Pete have a little bit more fun. Heading right into the second half, Bad News Bears with an early gamble on B with an early stack, and it might just work out in their favor as OCG. They're looking for that interaction, but it's breaking apart at the seams. Swisher only able to get one. Two more players remaining here on this B site for BNB. And Oceanus, they're looking for a quick take potentially.
Well, Jonji's trying to hit some heads. They're not connecting. Spongy up close. Will have to trade, but it's still a 2v3 in the favor of Oceanus, but that devolves to a 1v2. Melio in the clutch. He gets demolished. It's Spongy, the rock, and the anchor of the Bad News Bears locks things down on Pillar. Peter, who got all the information in the early going, clearing that fountain and calling that B hit off the cuff, comes in to help out too. But Spongy, this magnificent dance around the Pillar, hitting all the heads, crisp and clean. And the final shot comes through from to nothing but confidence from Spongy here. Great stuff.
Oh, beautiful start, especially with every pistol round that we've had thus far. There's always one player that tends to get the 3K or 4K. This time it's Spongy's turn. Certainly efficient, but now Bad News Bears against these Deagles. Oh boy. I was gonna say Deagles, but really those that were bought out have gone down. Instead, now it's just the Glocks and Alter taking down Jules. So Vec now remaining in a 1v4, looking for a little bit of damage. Not gonna be able to find anything. So yeah, Bad News Bears certainly extending their lead, but it's not much for Oceanus to really worry about.
Not really. In fact, it's par for the course there. No real investment, so no real chance at winning the round. But here comes the chance for Oceanus. They have full rifles. Their utility is a little lacking, though. Again, only one Molotov on this first gun round for them. And Peter has the AWP in hand. This is a scary proposition right now for Oceanus. Pete will fall back towards A site. In fact, he's the only defender of this site for now. There's a quad stack on B from the Bad News Bears where they're going. Joel's locking down this push, though, has a perfect chance for a lineup. Sprays down both, a little bit belabored on the second, but overall, great stuff right there. Castro takes down Peter from behind, leaving Jonji and Spongy absolutely abandoned. Jonji will pick up one on this pseudo retake, but I don't think the Bad News Bears are really going to be too content to throw their bodies at this one. And yeah, Jonji's just going to run back for the hills.
A little bit of fake sea doodle too. I might just actually approach. Again, it is the bonus for most of the players from BNB. A little bit too much of an investment from Peter and Alter, so can't exactly consider it that, but John G still on site. Tries to go for the defuse. KMZ is still looking back on site, so there you go. Bomb going off. Spongy last person remaining. Bad news bears are not going to be able to reinvest all too much into this next round. A half buy potentially, or really even a force to try to get that economy equalized. But it was well done by Oceanus in a sense, in terms of counteracting the early aggression from Bad News Bears, because he had that first interaction back in Monster. But more importantly, Castro, empty bathrooms, takes his time, doesn't make a singular peep, still clearing out Peter in what was a very B-heavy spot for Bad News Bears again.
Good timing on that nade takes Castro down to 71 HP. This B stack again here from Bad News Bears. It's Jonji for one. Swisher comes in to help out. Jonji grabs a second, but here comes KMZ. He had a great run boost, but the smoke was able to block his vision, nullifying that early op peak. He still will be able to bring it back to a 2v4, but still Jonji is holding things down on the B site. Has Spongy with him towards Monster Tunnel. Jonji in a creepy angle, might just swing for the trade. KMZ falls back though. Jonji has to reposition, but he will spray down KMZ, leaving Joel's in a 1v3. He's made it a 1v2. Tried to escape, but none shall escape the grasp of Jonji. 4 kills from on the round. Bad News Bears off the back of a force will pick up the 11th on the board. And something to note too is the round that Oceanus really started going with momentum was that very aggressive B play on a bit of a broken buy, similar to that from Bad News Bears. Bad News Bears essentially played it the same way and got the same result.
That's really how Bad News Bears have been playing, period. But we mentioned that Oceanus, really what they should be going for a lot of these rounds should be that aggression, should be trying to force back Bad News Bears, and indeed they're trying it over towards the mid side, but you still have Peter make it a third potentially. Yes, he will. Oh my, Peter. Joel's now the last one remaining in a 1v3, and oh boy, Boggs. Again, Oceanus, they try a whole lot of tricks throughout the map, especially over towards that mid side, but certainly doesn't work out in this favor. And Joel's with a little bit of a tune. Bad News Bears now 3v1, and they're all booted around the bomb. Joel's, he's having fun with it, but at this point, it's just a long range game of ring around the rosy.
It's only a matter of time there. Swisher goes for a very aggressive play with the MP9. If it devolved into a 1v2, Joel's has a very significant chance of pulling that one back, but Swisher takes advantage of the high jumping accuracy of the MP9, finishes off the AK. Look at that third flick there from Pete, though. He's starting to heat up, and that's what I said. Get Pete on the CT side with an op on a map like this, and he will start to demolish you. This is very reminiscent of Nuke now, but Jonji does still hold on to the top fragger role for Bad News Bears by a very significant margin, about double the average of his teammates. Alter, though, locks down one through Khan, might have himself another.
Whoa.
That's a great job by Melio, though, to cut the bleeding, but there's Pete.
There he is, indeed. He's ready for everything. Pulls out the sidearm, and well, he's able to get the second frag, but this time he has KMZ up against the ropes a little bit. Oh, actually does catch Peter. Barely through the wall. Yet another awkward interaction to finish off a round, but not really much to say in terms of the Oceanus side, especially because of the BNB holds. Jonji actually ended up getting a headshot clean through the wall into connector. But not only that, but going into this round, Bad News Bears, you mentioned this really off call, Boggs, but Oceanus, they like their own double ops, but Bad News Bears, we've seen a whole lot of successful double ops in their Cash Cup runs.
Oh, yes, we have. And pretty much everybody on this roster can do work with the sniper. It's going to be Swisher's turn this time, as actually Swish and Pete are going to hold B tunnels. This is a full-on ego stack right now from the Bad News Bears. Jonji's behind the smoke in construction, too. He should be able to pop ahead after that smoke fades against Castro. Swisher has been dealt with, and actually Castro returns that favor onto Jonji. So a man advantage for Oceanus here, but oh, Peter. He will not be stopped. He will not be moved. He will do the rocking Gus, and he's gonna go forward, flying around. No scope on the Castro. It's style from Peter. It's poise and panache. Oceanus bring it to a 2v2, but when Peter is playing like this, what can you do to stop this man?
Melio gonna be able to take down Pete. Oh, jeez, oh Pete. Oh, it's nice to have a little bit of a laugh mid-cast. Peter, always very entertaining, but he took up all the kills in the round. And with Oceanus essentially taking real estate of the entire map, especially throughout that rotation from Bad News Bears, it's a massive, massive move from them. Now they restrict Spongy down to a 2v1, and the wide swing from Melio is going to be able to take down Spongy. So that's at least a round back after the streak of Bad News Bears. So some dramatics, some fun, but Oceanus, they still pull it back. But of course, we need to get a replay of this. There was a double hold over toward that tunnel's position, but Peter.
Oh, that no scope.
He had one chance of that. One chance at it, and well, he certainly made it worth it. Bad News Bears with a force buy, but it's mostly a deco buy here, Boggs.
Yeah, they have an MP9 and a FAMAS, though, and, well, we all know the Deagles in the hands of Swisher, Alter, and Janji can do some serious damage. Alter will catch one on the shotgun spray.
And bomb?
Yeah, that's a bomb. That's a blunder.
A little bit of a blunder, but a blunderous gap in the smoke from Pete.
I think
Exactly
Pete wanted the info there.
Well, certainly so, but not gonna get too much of it. Still Melio around this corner. Good smoke down in mid. But again, that bomb still very much in the line of sight. What a flash from Alter. And Alter capitalizes on a kill back. Unreal scenes as once again an eco is working out for one of these teams. And Bad News Bears, they're rallying as Peter picks up the all-important AWP. Vec now in a 1v4. A rare miss from P. Vec actually takes out Janji. Still the tenacity of Vec. Had to go for it. But now Oceanus, they're a little bit scattered, a little bit all over the place as they actually want to fight back Bad News Bears on a 14-9 scoreline. Boggs, this game could be done just with this result alone.
They have no other option but to force into this round either. Your odds of winning go down exponentially when the opposition has match or map point when you lack double digits. So for OCG right now, they need this round to try and hold off overtime point as much as possible. But Peter and Spongy just obliterating this B hit. Janji might have gone down early, but that's going to matter not at all, as the hit will come in towards A, but it's a 4v2 now in the favor of the Bad News Bears. Alter here holding the line, hitting all the headshots. Makes it a 1v3 for KMZ. Yes, he does have the bomb, but the Bad News Bears are on another level right now. The confidence is seething through them, and there's not really a way I could see OCG realistically having an answer to it, because a lot of what the Bad News Bears doing is just pure confidence and pure raw aim peaks. And what
the
can
ego
you
peaks.
counter? Yeah, you can't really counter that when the opposition is in that zone.
More serious in the zone of a sense. I mean, it's a weird scenario for Oceanus, as again, they try to maintain their own pace. They try to maintain things very